Hi, welcome to my podcast entitled The Wright Experience. I'm Dr. William T. Wright Jr., the founder and host of this show. I'm now beginning my 9th year as a school superintendent and my 24th school year as a public school educator. Over these years, I've been fortunate enough to get to know and work with some amazing leaders from all across the United States. The vision of this show is to share these podcasts with you so we can learn from people who are serving others every day. Our initial focus is on educational leaders. As the show continues to grow, we'll also focus on other disciplines down the road. When you hear something that you like, please click like, drop us a comment, or if you're viewing via YouTube, please comment, click like, and most importantly, that subscribe button. I've been absolutely amazed at the progress and the comments and feedback from this show thus far. This show is growing by leaps and bounds, and for that, I'm thankful to you. Tonight is episode 21 of The Wright Experience. My guest tonight is an amazing educator who grew up in the state of North Carolina, but now serves students and staff in Chicago, Illinois. She's the daughter of a mom who was a retired educator and served for many years in Durham, North Carolina's public schools, and a dad who was one of the fiercest educational proponents I've ever known. She's also my cousin. She received her education from the best schools in the nation, and now her passion is to provide quality education for others. My guest tonight is Ms. Constance Jones. In November of 2018, Constance Jones became the Chief Executive Officer of the Noble Network of Charter Schools, Illinois' largest charter school network. And she's also the first African-American and first female to hold that position. Connected through community groups and board positions across Chicago, she quickly became a widely influential and trusted voice within the nation's third largest school district. As Noble's CEO, she oversees the strategy, operations, and academic results of an organization of over 12,700 students and 1,500 staff across 18 campuses. The total budget in excess of $220 million per year. Nationally renowned for preparing its students, 98% students of color and 89% from under-resourced communities to be accepted to and graduate from college. Noble represents about 12% of all of Chicago public schools high schoolers. Under Constance's leadership, Noble continues to set the high water mark for college preparation across the city's public schools, ultimately bringing and contributing to a significant portion of the success that CPS has publicly claimed in recent years. Constance previously served as Noble's Chief External Affairs Officer and President, where she spearheaded a campaign that resulted in Noble winning the Broad Foundation's National Prize for Best Charter School in 2015. She continues to stand out as a coalition leader and advocate for high-quality public schools of all types. Prior to Noble, Constance was the National Development Director at KIPP Foundation and held sales and operations roles at Johnson & Johnson and Hyatt Corporation. Constance has an MBA from Harvard Business School and a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where she received the Distinguished Young Alumni Award in 2020. In May 2020, Constance was named one of Chicago Magazine's 50 most powerful women and was chosen to be the Crain's 40 under 40 class in 2019. She serves on the Charter School Growth Fund Board of Directors and is the vice chair of Hope Chicago. Constance is the founder of a scholarship at North Carolina Central University for first-generation math and science majors in honor of her late father. And at this time, I'd like to welcome Constance Jones.
Hi there, Tommy. Good to see you.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much.
You are the first and only guest that I have that has called me that name. I'll let you get away with that because we're kinfolk.
I'm not even going to try and call you William or Will or Dr.
That's right. You're not used to that, are you?
He's stuttering and stumbling all night long. So as long as you're okay with Tommy, that works well.
That's who I am to the home folks and family. So that's all right.
Okay.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. Just want to tell you right off the bat, we're so proud of you as fellow educators, but also family is supposed to uplift family. So I am absolutely proud of you. You come from great stock, and you've done really well for yourself, and we're just proud of the efforts that you have already begun and are continuing to do for public school children. So,
well,
thank you.
I appreciate that. And there's really nothing to thank me for. I am just, grateful to be able to do this work. As you know very well, Tommy, we stand on the shoulders of giants. Our family
Right.
has come such a long way in such a short period of time. And so I really just consider it a privilege to do this work and to be able to talk to you tonight. And thank you for receiving me. As a hardworking educator, we don't get much time off. And there's
Right.
this misconception that during the summer times, we're just kind of chilling. And that's not the case. We're preparing for the upcoming school year. But I was able to find a couple of days to get away for a little vacation. So thank you for accepting me in my island wear as I'm spending a little time just trying to relax in the midst of working and trying to get things done to prepare for our kids and staff in a couple weeks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll take greatness wherever I can get it. How about that? So tell us about the Noble Charter School Network and what makes it the place to be for students and staff in Chicago.
Yes, so I've been at Noble now for a little over 6.5 years, and we were founded in 1999. We are primarily a high school model, which makes us incredibly unique. As you shared, we are blessed to serve over 12,700 kids in the city of Chicago. There are 77 neighborhoods in Chicago, for those who might not be familiar with Chicago. And we serve kids from all over, from every single neighborhood, primarily from the South and West sides, from under-resourced communities. And it's just honestly, it's very much a calling for me. As you mentioned, Tommy, we come from a family of very proud educators, folks who work very hard to ensure that folks like, you and me would have the opportunity to receive a high quality public school education. And I attended public school my entire life. I attended University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I just feel it's my responsibility to be able to provide the same opportunity to students who look like us. As you mentioned, 98% of the kids we serve are Black or Latinx in Chicago. And we are known for having some of the strongest academic and college results, not just in the city of Chicago, but in the entire country, particularly when we look at students from under-resourced communities. And what gets me up every day is just knowing that all of our kids are capable. They just need a chance. They just need a shot. They need someone to believe in them, particularly in these times of, living, surviving through a pandemic. It's important for them to have hope and be able to see beyond the many valleys and mountains that might be in their way. And so if those things are true, again, with all the right supports in place, I know our kids can do anything. And I've seen them do incredible things. So really grateful. I mean, Chicago is very different from, serving places in North Carolina, but a lot of things are very similar in terms of we see, high poverty in some pockets, high crime, and folks that just really need just some extra support. And I just see it as our responsibility to do that.
Awesome. Awesome. So we learned in your biography that you are the first African-American and first female to serve as the CEO of Noble. So what do you believe that trailblazing opportunity represents for your organization, but ultimately for women of color?
Sure. So when I joined Noble in January 2015, I joined as the Chief External Affairs Officer, which you mentioned in my bio. And I was the first woman of color, the first person of color to serve on that Chiefs team. And at that time, the organization had been around for 17 years. And so all of my colleagues were white men. And I remember talking to my dad, who was living at the time. I actually was going through the process with Noble. He was diagnosed with cancer, and I dropped out of the process. And I went home and checked on him, and I remember telling him about, I think I need to just, focus my time and attention on, family, because that's always what's most important. And I was sharing with him about Noble and the students we serve, mostly being Black and brown students, and how I'd be the first, person of color ever in the history of the organization. And I remember him telling me, like, you need to get back in the process. Like, those kids need you. I've worked really hard for you to have a seat at the table, and now it's your time to take your seat. So I went back into the process, and lo and behold, I got the role as the Chief External Affairs Officer. I did that for 3 years, and then was promoted to president, and then was promoted to Chief Executive Officer in November 2018. I mean, I really believe that too much is given, much is required. It has not been easy being a trailblazer, to use the language that you use. But at the same time, we come from a family of trailblazers. My dad was the first African-American male to graduate from North Carolina State University with a Master of Science in Statistics. He loved math so much. It was his passion that's how I got my name Constance, which means the constant. It was, a love of his, but it was really, really hard being the first. And so I had the good fortune of learning from folks who were the first in my family, and seeing how they were able to navigate some incredibly treacherous and hard waters in order to get to where they need to go, in order to serve the people that need to be served, and create pathways for the people who were so deserving of those pathways. So I'm really grateful to, again, come from a place where that is something that is just part of me growing up in the Jones family. But it has not been easy. It's been really hard. There've been times I've wanted to give up, and the things that keep me going are the kids. Is, looking at them and knowing that having a Black woman lead the organization makes a big difference. In Chicago, like when I go to our schools and they see me and they know they got a Black woman CEO with, I have braids now, but I normally have like my natural hair out regardless. Like I am a proud Black woman. They look at me and they know that it's possible for them to do the same thing. And so it goes back to what I said earlier about like our kids having hope. It's important for them to have hope. It's important for them to see themselves and people who see themselves in leadership roles, people who look like them. And so I'm just really, motivated and inspired by that.
And that certainly is what helped us.
Sure.
You're younger than I am, much younger. I remember when you were in a bassinet, and I was not. So, but anyway, that's what helped us, is that we had examples in front of us. So
that's right.
So now it's time for us to be those examples. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Constance, you began your career just as I did in the corporate world. So, what was your transition to education like when you took that leap, and what do you believe helped you in that transition?
Yeah, so it's a funny story. I went into business because honestly, I had a job at Lady Foot Locker when I was 16 years old. That I worked at Lady Foot Locker for 5 years until literally they closed them all down. I loved that job, and that's where I learned sales, and that's where I learned business. And as you know, Tommy, our family, was kind of just getting started with higher education.
Sure.
Being exposed to various careers. But in my mind, it was like I was being pushed to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a business person. I felt like I knew business from working at Lady Foot Locker. So I went to UNC Chapel Hill. I was like, I like business. That's what I'm a major in. And so from that, I worked at Johnson & Johnson. I always knew I wanted to go back and get my MBA. So that was something I had my eyes on as I was working in my first job in corporate America. But all the while, when I was at UNC, when I was, working for Johnson & Johnson, I was always working with kids to serve communities. When I was working at Chapel Hill, when I was a student at Chapel Hill, my senior year, I received this award for volunteering in the local community. It was through the YMCA. I was the only person out of 3,000 students in the university to get this award. And I was particularly tutoring kids once a week in under-resourced communities around Chapel Hill. And I remember being a little perplexed when I got this award, because I just saw it as my responsibility as someone who had had the blessing of and the gift of going to a great university. And yet right down the road, there were kids who were not receiving a great education. I saw it as my responsibility to tutor them. So I was, but I was grateful for it, but it was shocking to me. So I was always involved in education, even though I was pursuing business. I was always involved with kids and helping kids, even though I was pursuing this business career. It wasn't until I got to Harvard Business School and I took this class called Entrepreneurship and Education Reform during my second year at Harvard Business School that I was talking to a professor who I love. We are close today, Stacy Childress, and pulled me over one day and she said, "You need to go into education. Like, I know your story. We just need more folks like you in education." And I was like, I kind of got this charge to go forth with this business degree and have a business career. Like, that was kind of like the expectation. So I definitely tucked it in my back pocket, but it wasn't until 2008, I graduated from business school. I was working for Hyatt. I had a great job in the spa operations division. Recession hit, everything changed. I was still working for Hyatt, but the conditions were very different from what I originally signed up for. And a student, a colleague from that class that I took at Harvard Business School reached out to me and said, "Hey, there's this great opportunity at this organization called KIPP Foundation." Similar message to what my professor said to me. "I know your story. I know your passions. Like, they could use someone like you. How about you go for it?" And something in my spirit just told me to do it. I was literally working on a project in Canada. I've been out there for some time. And I went for it, and that was in 2009, and I've been in education ever since. So, this is not everybody's story, but for me, I definitely felt like it was a calling. I felt like there were things that were happening throughout my life, even though on the outside it didn't look like I was an educator. I come from a family of educators. As you mentioned in the story about my mom and my dad, they were and are fierce educators. Education was everything. It still is everything. And it was kind of like in my blood and my DNA. So I took a different path, but I eventually found my way. And I haven't looked back since. It's been great. And I'm just really fortunate to be here.
Great. Awesome. And I know that they both are proud of you. No question about that. And we're glad you're in education. We need good folks. I say that just about every day in little old Hertford County. So as schools begin to transition into post-pandemic education, what are some lessons learned that you believe will be valuable moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, no question, if you are an educator and you've been navigating this pandemic, two pandemics, if you will. There's a pandemic of COVID-19. There's the pandemic of race and injustice and racism in our society. These things are not new, but somehow they just surface in the midst of all that's happening in the world, right? It's been really, really hard. I'll take you to a moment. Last Monday, I was in a meeting with my leadership team. The CDC had just said that if you're vaccinated, in schools, students, staff, they advised us not to wear masks. Okay, well, the systems and the operations and the thinking and intentionality that has to come forth when those types of decisions are made, only educators understand. We're in meetings trying to figure out what are all the things that need to be true to make sure that we are keeping our students and staff safe under this recommendation, under these conditions. Sure. Fast forward to this week, everything has flipped with the CDC. That is just one example of how it's kind of felt like we've been on a hamster on that wheel. I've had 20 hamsters and gerbils in my lifetime because I'm an animal lover. It's been nonstop. I've learned a lot of lessons. One of the lessons I learned is, and I knew this before, but it's really proven to be even more true in COVID-19 over the past year and a half, is you gotta trust your gut. Trust your gut. We've had to make some really big decisions that would literally impact lives during this pandemic. And the challenging thing is, probably more than ever before, there's been a lack of information. As everyone's trying to figure out this virus and, what's true and what's not true, that doesn't take away from the fact that there's a decision that needs to be made today. So in those moments, I've learned to trust my gut, trust my experience, trust my instincts. I can't think of a time where I've done that and it has failed me. Now, I can think of times where I've gone against my gut and my instincts and it didn't turn out well. But every time I've trusted my gut and my instincts, like things have turned out the way that that they needed to. So that's one thing I've learned. The other thing I've learned is that if we've done our jobs really well as educators, then and we built trusting relationships, strong relationships with the students and families that we work in service to. It's not the other way around. Like, you know, they don't work in service to us, we work in service to them. If we've done a really good job of building those relationships, then they will come to us in their greatest time of need, and we have a responsibility to serve them. And so I would like to think that Noble, as we are today, yes, we are an education institution, but we are also more than ever a community organization. You know, we've given out well over 1 million meals during the course of this pandemic, not just to Noble students and families, but to all students and families in Chicago. We have raised and distributed similarly over $1 million to families, Noble families, to help them just survive this pandemic in the form of bill pay, in the form of, you know, coverage for rent when they've hit hard times, additional food supports. We actually turn our schools into both vaccination sites as well as COVID testing sites when we saw that this pandemic was disproportionately impacting our students and families. We wanted to provide more testing. We wanted to provide, you know, easy access to vaccines. We have provided a variety of wraparound services and social emotional supports for the students who are dealing with trauma on a variety of levels. So like, I'm really proud of that. And I realized that, like, particularly given the fact that, as you mentioned, 98% of the students we serve are Black and Brown in Chicago, 89% of them qualify for free reduced lunch. You know, things have been exacerbated during this pandemic, but a lot of the challenges that our students and families experience on a day-to-day basis, they're not going to go away, sadly, just because the pandemic goes away eventually, hopefully. So we have a responsibility to really like step up and provide those supports year-round to our students and families. And we've been evolving our model to do that. So that's another key lesson that we've learned.
Right. So, and those lessons seem to be continuously evolving, don't they? I mean, it's about the time we think we got it figured out, something else will come up. But some amazing lessons and amazing foresight for sure. So charter schools sometimes have the opportunity to create their own school platforms, so to a certain degree anyway. Some seem to be successful and some aren't. So my question is, what do you believe the keys are to a successful charter school district?
Yeah, it's a great question. And let me just say that, again, like, we are public schools. And so there's certainly misconception out there.
Oh, yeah, right. Absolutely.
That, you know, charter schools, at least in the state of Illinois, like, charter schools are public schools. We don't have private charter schools. And so we receive public funding, similar to what someone who goes to a traditional public school would receive. You know, it's interesting because when I first started this job as Chief External Affairs Officer back in 2015, I found myself being pushed and forced into these mind-numbing conversations about charter versus non-charter schools. And for a while, like, I played that game, like trying to defend charter schools. And then, you know, I started talking to more of my parents and more of my students and learning about their experiences. And you know what, Tommy, I found out that, like, my parents and students don't care whether a school is a charter or non-charter. They just want their kid going to a great school. They just want their kid going to a school that is safe, that's going to provide the safety emotionally, you know, physically for their child, that is going to prepare them for success in college and life beyond. So this whole, at least in the Chicago context, and I can only speak in that context, this whole like charter versus non-charter narrative is really just a political debate. And let me tell you something, I'm not about politics. I'm about serving students and families. That's my number one goal. I recognize that politics exists, but like, I don't pull myself into them. So I say all that to say, I think that families, first and foremost, based on what I've heard and what I've experienced, they just need to be focused on like whether it's a good school. You know, if it's a traditional public school, good school, great. If it's a charter school, good school, great. I think a couple of things that make Noble successful in particular is we do have a variety of flexibilities as a charter school that allow us to align people and resources in a way that can help us serve students better. So for example, to take this context of the pandemic, right? So when our schools closed their doors, the physical school buildings in March of 2020, we realized that we had to take our traditional brick and mortar model and transform it into a remote learning model. And quite frankly, we were not prepared to do that. We recognized that we were going to be able to save X million dollars in the first couple months of what we knew at the time our school buildings being closed, and just like operations costs, not heating and cooling buildings, electricity. We very quickly took that money because we could as a charter school because of the flexibilities we had, and we bought every single student. Like I said, we serve almost 13,000 students. We bought every single student who did not have access to a Chromebook, a laptop. We also gave them Wi-Fi free of charge. I mean, we're on the phone, social workers, God bless them, they're on the phone, advisors are on the phone, calling students, calling families. Like, you know, we had to get real good with our questioning, because sometimes if like you ask the question, like, do you have access to a Chromebook? The answer would be yes for a lot of our families, but we have like one Chromebook and a family of 7 is trying to use that one Chromebook. So we had to get really good with our questioning. But we did that. We shipped, even though it might have been maybe, you know, a 30-minute to 2 hours, depending on where you are in Chicago, commute to pick up the Chromebook. We didn't know anything about this virus and what, like, the impact of it, but we knew it was deadly. We shipped the Chromebooks to every single student family who said I needed them. They didn't have to jump through any loopholes. It's just like, you need a Chromebook? Cool. We were able to move so quickly, literally so fast, because I had the ability to be able to say, all right, this is a need. Let's allocate these dollars to go here. So we do that in the midst of the pandemic. We've done that with regard to how we support students and families on the path to college, making sure that, like, for the moment they start with us as a freshman, we have various supports and experiences and people in place to make sure that they are put on this path to college, which we know for Black and Brown families, particularly in the United States, is the one thing that's proven to be successful in eliminating poverty for the families we serve. So I think that's something that I'm really grateful for as a charter school leader, is the ability to, like, really be able to be flexible and nimble, innovate when necessary, and make quick decisions. And I mean, that's just been my experience. But I really do think when it comes to students and families, they need to mostly be focused on, like, you know, is it a good school? Like, the governance model, what it's titled, is it a good school? Because every child needs and deserves to go to a good, high quality public school.
Well, that flexibility that you've talked about, that's one of the things that we're focusing on trying to get better about in North Carolina, is the ability to be able to make decisions, just like you're talking about. The pandemic afforded us a lot of decisions to be made, and we got some flexibility during the pandemic. And so, you know, you want to keep that, as you're saying, because it makes you be able to serve kids better, serve students better, which is what we're all supposed to be doing. So that's outstanding, outstanding. So talk to us a little bit about if you had the opportunity to give advice and pointers to success for a brand new school leader, what would you say?
Yeah, so one of the things I've learned is that your team is everything. You have to have a great team. The work is too hard, it's too complex for you to do it on your own. And so who you hire to be, I'm gonna start with the leadership team, recognizing that teachers are critically important. But when I think about some of the lessons I've learned in response to your question, is that your team is everything. You know, as I mentioned, I believe that I've done a lot of great things for Noble, and I'm really grateful to be in this position, particularly as the first woman of color, the first person of color to ever occupy the seat. And at the same time, I know I have shortcomings because I am, one, human, and two, because of my background experiences. particularly being in the business sector and not having led a school. So over half of the team that I very intentionally and purposely hired has teaching experience, principal experience. I lean on them deeply for their expertise and knowledge when making big decisions that will impact our students and our families, their experiences. And having folks who are aligned to the mission of the organization, we're aligned to the values of the organization is critical. I just can't stress it enough. It's always been true, is even more so true in the midst of this pandemic, where you could easily look up at the end of the week on a Saturday night or Sunday, depending on when you start the new week, and be like, I just worked like 80 to 100 hours this week. You just cannot do it alone. And that's both in terms of time, actual time, which is, we're all limited in, but also in terms of the knowledge and experience that people need to bring in order to make like really good, sound decisions that are great for kids and families. So that's one of the things that I would certainly advise new leaders to do, is just be really thoughtful about like who's on your team, and if they're the right people on the team. And one of the other lessons that I've learned is that like we're always, I would say, if we're doing our jobs well, we're always looking for ways to evolve and to improve. Sure. So, I mean, this was just kind of how I was raised. Like I've learned that when a challenge comes your way, you got to recognize it's a challenge. It's hard. Like we're going to name it the way it is. But at the same time, there's an opportunity within that. So the things that I've learned through navigating this 2020 and this 2021, I've really tried to use those lessons learned for us to get better as an organization. And so we have learned that we need to evolve like our policies and our practices to make sure that we are truly honoring the dignity and humanity of our students, as well as providing them with an excellent, high quality public school education. So we've totally revamped our student code of conduct, leveraging the voices and the perspectives of the students and families we serve, and the staff to really, create, the policies and processes that we will have in our schools. We've, completely modified our school uniform policy. I mean, there are so many things I could name that we have changed to really meet this moment and to make sure that whenever we get out of this pandemic, that we're not just snapping back to the way things used to be, that we are using as an opportunity to grow and get better. So, I mean, we're always learning. And I think that's our responsibility, to be open to learning and getting better.
Well, you mentioned, and I think that's important, the value of team. And I would argue, when I first got out of industry and got into education, I was told, forget everything you know about business, this isn't business. And I would argue that the reason why we understand and value and cherish the importance of team and, team building and having the right people on your team. And, as the Jim Collins book, From Good to Great, says, having the right people on the bus and having different people drive the bus, when it needs to be driven. I think that because of that, we end up building good organizations. So, we better learn things from business and infuse business. We need the education professionals too, absolutely. But the best organizations, school district organizations, I think, have a combination of all of that. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I it's so easy because I've been there. I've done it myself, to get pulled into these like conversations around like what's right, what's wrong, what needs to be true, what's not true, like who's good, who's bad. And at the end of the day, I always go right back to what do my students and families need, and what are they looking for? And do I have the right people on the bus to make sure that we're catering to them, since we work in service to them? So it's interesting because I will say that before coming to education, I was working in business. I thought like, okay, I'm just going to be coming into education and helping kids, and like, that's it. And the narratives that I'm involved in are fascinating in terms of just having to kind of sift through all the stuff to get down to like what's really, really important.
Sure.
I think if people just focus on students and families and listening, because it's our responsibility to listen just to what they want, then a lot of the stuff that people, try and make like the issue or the priority that shouldn't be will probably go away.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So maybe you all don't have this problem in Chicago. I'm being a little facetious, but the recruitment and retention of quality personnel has been a challenge for the last several school years across the nation. What do you believe public schools, and that's including all of us, can do better in that area?
Yeah. So last year, let's call it July 2020, when we ended the school year, I was very proud. We had the highest teacher and student retention that we've had in the history of our organization, over 20 years at that point. I was really proud of that. I think that, but I know I have to get, I have to be comfortable saying like statements like I know. Sometimes I'll hedge a little bit and say I think, but I know from what I've heard from our teachers and our students, but honing on our teachers for a little bit, they felt incredibly supported during this pandemic. They felt we made some really great sound decisions. And they love our organization. They want to stay with us. They didn't see themselves going anywhere else. So our retention was like in the high 90s. I want to say like 97, 98%. It was unprecedented. This past year, our retention is a little bit lower. I'm expecting it probably to drop off in the next year, and here's why. I mean, we'll do everything we can to keep, our incredible teachers and staff. It's our responsibility to do everything we can to keep every single student who comes our way. But I mean, what I'm learning and hearing is that a lot of folks are tired. Sure. This pandemic, it's funny. I think the easiest way I can explain it is to have every parent who did remote learning and virtual learning and homeschooling to reflect on what they've been through over this past year. And then think about how that is something that teachers have gone through and continue to go through. It is one of the hardest jobs in the world. It's also one of the greatest jobs in the world. I taught a class this past semester to a bunch of Noble students. And it was, of all the things I do during the week, which caused me a lot of stress and gray hairs, this was probably number 1 or 2 every single week that I was teaching. So it's a tough job. So that, coupled with the fact that people have been navigating their personal lives and all that comes with that, trying to live and navigate a pandemic, I sadly think we're going to see a lot of burnout. So it's my responsibility to think about how do, again, we evolve? How do we make this, how do we get people over this hump of yes, we all know we've all learned and lived and are still living through a pandemic that comes with a cost. How do we get people over this hump so that we can continue to keep our people with us? And again, I mean, I'll say this a lot because it's my number 1 responsibility as a leader, listening. We have to listen to people and understand where they are and what they need from us. And it's our responsibility as leaders to provide that for them. And so I think that in a lot of ways where I might not have the answers now, I can certainly find those answers by listening to the people I serve. And that includes teachers and staff as well.
Very good. Very good. So that wraps up the questions I have for you. Are there any other aspects of your work that I have not covered that might be useful to share with the audience at this time?
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the conversation, Tommy, and I thank you for taking the time to, to talk with me and invite me onto your podcast. I'll just say this. There are a lot of people trying to figure out what to do. And I'll speak in the context of Chicago, but I think this is the case in many parts of the country with regard to violence, with regards to jobs, unemployment, with regard to a lot of different things. And what I know to be true is education is the lever for making our cities, our towns, our communities, our countries a better place. There's a lot of things out here that are distracting us from that one goal. But when I think about my personal story and all the opportunities that I have had, because, I had a mom who was the only one of 8 kids to be able to go to college and graduate from college. And as you mentioned, she became a public school teacher for almost 3 decades. I had a father who had a passion and love for math and, went on to become a statistician, and the first in his family in a lot of ways, first to graduate with a Master of Science in Statistics from his university. It has changed the trajectory of my life. Sure. And the same remains true for many students and families across the country. So when everyone's looking for these solutions, how to solve these very complex challenges and problems, I encourage people to get involved in education within their local school district, within their local school, to learn more. See, a lot of people come to me and they say, I don't know what to do, or I don't know a lot about it. Well, learn, read, talk to someone. Join a podcast like this. There are lots of ways. Ignorance is not an excuse. There's lots. People make time for, the things that they care about. If you care about your town, if you care about your city, if you care about this country, get involved in education, get involved in the education of our young people. It's so important. It will truly transform this country for the better.
All right. You sound very much like Lottie Van Jones just then. How about that?
Gosh, she gets so proud. Let me tell you something. I think about how my grandma, who made, some of the best collard greens I've ever had. And she made it in the school that she was working in the cafeteria. Right. How she was so proud to know that, her granddaughter, where she went from working in the cafeteria, her granddaughter is now leading a network of schools in Chicago with thousands of kids, in a very short period of time. So anything's possible. Really grateful. Yeah.
Exactly right. Hold on with me for a minute. We'll come back and close out the show.
Okay.
My guest next week is Dr. Shamika Long Lane, who is the Chief Human Resources Officer for Elizabeth City State University in North Carolina. I look forward to the experience. That'll be next week, August 5th, 7:00 p.m. Looking forward to having you be a part of that podcast as well. Constance, I want to tell you, thank you very much for agreeing to be on this podcast and being my guest. Appreciate your willingness to share your insight and ideas. And I think everybody can see why we all are so proud of you and your accomplishments. And not only that, I know that the 12,000 children that you're serving every day in Noble know that they're blessed to have you serving as their leader. And so we look forward to your continued success. I look forward to having you back on this platform at a later date. You got to promise me you'll do that. and certainly I hope that this podcast motivates us all to serve and be better. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Tommy. It was so great being here tonight. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Good evening.
All right. Take care, cuz.